Well, good evening. Did you know that all of us have within us a dictionary, a secret dictionary that we don't really recognize? It has definitions for lots of words in it that are unique to you, but more than that, definitions for communication styles, communication events that are your result of growing up in the culture and the ways that you did. So that dictionary inside you is operative all the time, even though we don't recognize that it's there. Let me give you an example. When I first moved to the Yakima Valley and got acquainted with some of my Yakima Indian friends, I live in Toppenish on the Yakima Reservation. I was invited shortly to come to an event at one of the longhouses. I was very pleased to be invited. And when I got there, I saw people smiling and welcoming me. I felt good about that because I didn't know the situation at all, so I didn't know how I would fit. And as soon as I walked in the door, people were putting out their hand for handshakes. I thought, this is great, because I had learned in my childhood, handshakes are good ways to really connect with people. But then I had the first handshake, and it was kind of like this. And I thought, oh dear, maybe I'm really not supposed to be here. My inner dictionary had kicked in, and it was telling me, reminding me of how my father trained his daughters to do handshakes. You have to have a firm handshake, he told us. You have to grasp the other person's hand because you want them to know you really care about meeting them. You're greeting them sincerely. And here I was getting a handshake like this. So I thought, well, maybe they're all smiling, but maybe they don't really want me here, so I'm going to be real quiet. So throughout the rest of the event, I was pretty withdrawn. And for me, that's amazing. And so by the time I left, I was still thinking, I don't know if I should have come here. The next day, I ran into one of my good Yakima friends that I'd known for a long time, and I said, can I ask you something about my experience at the Longhouse yesterday? She said, sure. Did you like it? I said, oh, it was very interesting, and they said a lot of nice things, but the way they gave me handshakes when I came in, I felt like, I don't think they really wanted me there. Well, what do you mean? She said. And I said, well, they did it like this. You know, just kind of gentle, just barely grasping my hand, not really grasping, just more touching my hand. Well, what's the matter with that? She said. I said, well, I was trained, I needed to have a firm handshake. So I thought that they didn't want me there. Oh, she said, a firm handshake, we're all taught that if you do that, it means you're trying to control the other person. You wouldn't want that. If they greeted you that way, they were seeing you as an equal. They wanted to establish a relationship with you where you were equals. Oh, I said. The dictionary that I was operating out of and the dictionary that my new Yakima acquaintances were operating out of, totally different. There's a name for that linguists, sociolinguists have developed. It's called a communication mismatch. I like to honestly call it a meaning mismatch. Simpler way to look at it, because the meaning of the different ways to do a handshake were the mismatch. The definition that I had and the definition that my new friends had were two different things, and we didn't even know that the definitions were different, so we had a miscommunication. Let me tell you another example that's a little bit humorous. A teacher told me one time about a new little boy that she had in her class. She taught third grade, and his family had just actually moved from Italy. in the rural area and had become farmers there. So little Tony is in her class. And one day she said she was delighted to hear that one of the other kids said, "Oh, guess what? Tony invited me to his house tonight. I get to go over there for dinner." So the next day, when the little boy came back in the classroom, she said, "Well, did you get to Tony's last night?" "Oh, yes." "Did you have a good time?" "Well, I like Tony and his family, but oh, I went home with the worst stomach ache." She said, "You did? Italians cook wonderful food, and besides, it's real healthy. What do you mean you had a stomach ache?" "Well," he said, "my mother, when she dropped me off, she told me, 'Remember, you have to clear your plate, because if you don't, it's an insult to the cook. So be sure you do that.' Well, I liked what Tony's mom cooked. It was just great on there. And I ate all of it first, and then she put some more on, and I ate some more. And then I was getting really full, and I said, 'No, no, thank you.' And my plate was all clean. She put more on it. It took a long time before she stopped putting food on my plate. And when I got home, I was so full. I couldn't sleep last night. My stomach hurt so much." Well, of course, the teacher was laughing, as you are. And she said, "You know, I grew up around some Italian people, and I learned that what the hostess and the cook is supposed to do, if you clear your plate, that means you're still a little hungry. So she's supposed to put some more food on it. So every time you cleared your plate, you were giving her the message that you'd like a little more." "Oh," he said. Okay, another example of a communication mismatch, a meaning mismatch, and a humorous one. But the big question is, what's the significance of this? Why would we care learning about meaning mismatches happening in life? Well, for little Tony, Tony's friend, it was worth knowing because of that bad stomach ache. But really, there are many occasions much more important than that stomach ache to making a real communication match and not mismatch. Let me give you an example that you might relate to this. So someone calls together a group of 10, 15 people that all are interested in solving an issue or a problem in either the company they work in or the neighborhood that they're in. And as they're sitting around the table, maybe 15 people, the leader who organized the meeting explains, "Now we've all have an interest in this issue. This is why we're here, and I'd like to have everybody just contribute here. What ideas do you have?" So the conversation starts, and somebody over here talks, and then somebody over here does, and pretty soon it's pretty good conversation. And out of the 15 people, let's say about 8 or 10 of them actually do speak up. And after some time, kind of getting towards a little direction they might take toward this issue, and the conversation kind of dies down, and the leader thinks, "Well, let's see if anybody else wants to talk." So he says, "Well, anybody else want to add something?" And he kind of looks over at 4 or 5 people that haven't spoken, and they're kind of looking down. They don't say anything. So he says, "Well, I think we've gotten something as a new idea to approach this, and so I think that our meeting is over, and we'll take the next steps, and I'll get back to you when we see how that's going." I get right out of the room and stand by the door, and as each person comes out, I ask him or her, "Oh, how did you find the meeting?" Virtually everybody who spoke up said, "Well, it was pretty good discussion, and we got to some things that I think we might be able to move ahead on. Yeah, it was good. I'm glad I came." And for the 4 or 5 people that didn't say anything, they say something like, "Oh, I guess it was okay. I think there were some other ideas that we could have explored, but they didn't come up." Somebody else said, "Well, I didn't speak up, so I didn't say a couple things that I think we should have considered." you could tell they weren't too pleased with how that had gone. Another one said, I don't know really why I was invited. I guess the people will start working on that idea, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll come next time. What was happening here? For the leader and for all the people who spoke up, their dictionary inside themselves said, when someone says, you're in a meeting and somebody says, please, anybody that has something to say, please speak up, they know they should speak up, and they will. They begin to talk. For the people who didn't say anything, and especially in this particular case I'm thinking of, came from a little different backgrounds than some of the others, in their dictionary, the dictionary said, when you're in a group of people that you don't know very well, not your family or close friends, but you don't know them too well, you don't speak up until you're actually called on. The leader should have said, if he wanted to know what I thought, he should have said, and ma'am, what do you think? Or I'd like to hear from that gentleman over in the corner. We didn't hear from you. Would you tell us what you're thinking? He didn't say any of those things, so I don't think he cared. I don't think he wanted to know what we had to offer. Two different definitions, and both sides are going to feel bad, because when I tell the leader, guess what I heard from those people that didn't speak up? And he's going to say, well, I gave them a big opportunity right at the end, even if I didn't call on them. I said, here's some time. Why don't anybody have any new ideas? Just give them before we close. Another part of our typical dictionaries have to do with timing. And these are things that we don't label, we just experience. So researchers, some of the sociolinguists and others have looked at this, and for a typical middle class, probably mostly white, professional group of people, the amount, when that leader said at the end, he said, would anybody have anything else to offer? Normally, it would be about 8 to 10 seconds that he would pause, and people would be expected to speak during that time. So if they came from the same background he did, they would know to speak up. But it turns out that for some other people, especially some Asian cultures, some Native American cultures, some African cultures, the amount of time that the pause would be before someone would actually start talking would be about 10 or 12 seconds. And it might last till about 20 seconds. So just put those numbers together. When the leader only left 8 to 10 seconds and then said, well, I guess there's nothing else to say, we'll meet again, those people who expected the 12 to 20 seconds are thinking, he didn't really want any comments. He didn't wait long enough to get them. He was just being polite. He didn't really want any comments. Another meaning mismatch. And when the leader, if you would decompose that situation enough so that he could hear that, would be kind of shocked, because he'd say, I gave an opportunity for everybody to speak up. Why didn't they? Because it didn't match what their inner dictionary was telling them. So are you beginning to think of some examples in your own experience where there's been this meaning mismatch, different expectations? And there's so many topics that could be covered in this. Eye contact, and you could go on. So what can I suggest about dealing with this? Well, I'll tell you what I've learned. I have a little code that I call the SOLVE code, S-O-L-V-E, and I try to follow that, which then helps me deal with a situation where a meaning mismatch might be occurring. The first thing is to just be aware. S stands for stop. Don't react right away. Stop, observe. Stop, S-O, observe. Just see what's happening. Let your mind take that in. The L is for listen, S-O-L. listen to what the other person or persons are saying. And if they're not saying anything, ask some very gentle questions. Something like, well, I'm thinking that there's something I'd love to know a little bit more about what you're thinking. What are you thinking right now? Something that gives them permission to talk. And as you listen to that L, then you might move to the V, the solve, the V in solve, and that is to view the bigger picture. If you can step back in your mind a little bit to see the whole scene here, maybe picture them in another setting or their family or friends, what would help you understand why there's this mismatch happening? And then lastly, explore, S-O-L-V-E. You viewed it and you're going to try to explore what you could do. The exploration can be later. You can take it up because if you feel you can't explore it right now, but don't forget it. As soon as you have time, like I did with my Yakima friend to find out about the handshakes. On the other hand, if you can explore it there with the person, it's even more help. So tonight, I hope that I've given you a new insight into how important the mismatches are that we run into very often, because they get in the way of us accomplishing things together, getting to the goals that we all care about and the relationships that we need. And I hope that you will enjoy using that solve code as much as I have. So thank you very much for listening.